Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back into our flow of football content. Barcelona played this week, and the Columbus Crew are back at the end of this week as well. So I got a lot of stuff that's been getting me really just worked up and excited to watch some more football stuff. So today, we're looking at a video from Daily Dose of Football who we haven't looked at in a while. It's about the beer chugging maniac who took over the Premier League. Per usual, I will leave the original video in the description down below, so be sure to go check them out. I want to make sure we credit these fabulous creators that make all these really good YouTube videos. So I'm excited for this one because this was made as suggested several weeks ago. Let's go.
So listen to this. Jamie Vardy's story is no miracle. After learning damn near everything I possibly could about him, I'm convinced the main reason why he only managed to go pro at 25 years of age was self-doubt, self-destruction, self-sabotage, whatever you want to call it. Even when he was back in the 7th tier, people were already trying to set him straight, telling him that he could play for England one day, but he never believed them. Instead, he seemingly kept doing everything in his power to destroy any chance he had of making it.
That's a hell of a haircut.
From getting wasted every single day to getting slashed across the face in a bar fight, landing himself in jail, being put on house arrest, even playing with an ankle monitor and almost quitting football entirely on more than one occasion. You name it. If it was a horrible idea, he probably did it. As he said in his autobiography, Balotelli would have been proud of me, but really, I think even good old Mario would have been worried for him. Even once he got to Leicester, he was still arriving at training, stinking of booze. He was going down the rabbit hole for nearly a decade before he set himself straight, and once he did, well, do you want me to list some of his records? By 2020, Guardiola's Man City had only allowed someone to put a hat-trick past him on 3 occasions. One was Lionel Messi, the other 2 were Jamie Vardy. In fact, at one point across the entire history of the Premier League, only Rooney and Shearer had more goals against the top 6 than him. He literally reached 100 Premier League goals faster than Ronaldo, Rooney, and Drogba, and in the past 10 years, no English player has ranked higher in the Ballon d'Or than Jamie Vardy. And this isn't new. No matter if he was in the 7th, 5th, or 2nd tier, he broke records everywhere he went. And you know what made him so special? Well, he wasn't made in a lab. He wasn't some robotic wonder kid who's been carefully curated in some high-tech academy. In a way, it was the fact that he lost himself completely that made him so special, so tough, so unpredictable. As Arsene Wenger once said, the kind of player that runs through a stone wall to score goals, they're not here. Not anymore. But Jamie Vardy, he was...
So I got a question. Can anybody win the Ballon d'Or, like, regardless of what tier of professional football that they play? Well, certain tiers are semi-professional, but can somebody in tier 2 win a Ballon d'Or, tier 3 levels of football? Or do you have to specifically be coming from a region's tier 1 like area? Also, actually, I really don't know the answer to this question either. What countries, what systems like La Liga, Serie A, you know, the Premier League, or even MLS, like what structures are eligible for the Ballon d'Or? Is it specifically a European-based trophy? Let me know. I actually don't think I've ever asked that question before.
Was always that guy. Even as a kid, he was a menace, but he was also outstanding at anything sports related. He literally held the record for the longest javelin throw at his school for years. He didn't even train for that. He just tried it one day and broke the record. So don't get it wrong, Vardy was well aware that he was a bit of a prodigy. Ever since he was a kid, his biggest dream was to be the next David Hurst and bring back the glory days to his dear Sheffield Wednesday. But just as everything seemed to be going great, the club had to get rid of one of their academy levels as a way to cut some costs, and in the middle of all that mess, a lot of players were released, and Vardy just happened to be one of them. But well, even though the managers encouraged him to find somewhere else to play and tried to explain to him that he was just on the receiving end of a massive butterfly effect, he convinced himself that it was all his fault, that he just wasn't good enough, and though I'm sure a lifetime of being the troubled kid didn't help with his self-belief, he took it way too far. He just quit. 8 months went by before he put on a pair of cleats again, and even then, it was like he was so afraid of failing that he refused to even try. Instead of finding a proper club, he began representing a local pub's football team at the request of one of his friends. It was just ridiculous. As he described it himself, I came on in the second half, and within 30 seconds, I hammered the shot at the keeper, and everyone was like, what just happened there? By the end of the match, I had scored twice. As I walked out, the coach was asking my friend, where the hell did you find him? In fact, the story of that match even made a local paper at the time. The only reason he might have a hard time finding it was that Jamie was using his friend's ID. That day, the man of the match was Glenn Maris. Still, even if by the end of the season Vardy was on 50 goals and his pub were local champions, it meant absolutely nothing. By the age of 23, he was dividing his time between breaking his back, working in a prosthetics factory, and playing for the mighty Stocksbridge Park in the 8th tier of English football. There were less than 1,000 people in the stands, and Vardy got paid £30 per match. He was lost there for 3 years. He tried college, even tried to join the army, but he got rejected everywhere, and eventually his life ended up going in a complete opposite direction. Vardy got into a bar fight, things got violent, and suddenly he was being fitted with an ankle monitor and put into house arrest. At 6 p.m. each day, he had to be back inside his house, otherwise the cops would be coming after him. As you might imagine, that made away games especially difficult. The coach would literally have to sub him off at the 60-minute mark so that he could make it back home in time. It was a miserable existence. Every night his monitor would glitch and go off without a reason, waking him up over and over again. Eventually it made him so paranoid that he struggled to even fall asleep. It was borderline torture, and what made all of this especially heartbreaking was that the only reason Vardy got into that fight was that he was protecting a disabled friend who was being bullied by 2 strangers.
So how the hell did he get in trouble for that? Did the other assholes get in trouble for that, or what? Wow, that's really fucked up.
Yeah, it's hard not to feel like it was undeserved, but as Vardy sat in a pub watching the likes of Aaron Lennon, the same age as him, travel to South Africa for the World Cup, even though he felt like he was as far away from that life as any of the overweight regulars who sat next to him, then he was offered a lifeline. Now on 66 goals in 107 games, he managed to get his team promoted for the first time ever, and somehow that convinced Halifax Town to put down an impressive £15,000 for his signing. And though they were also in the 7th tier, things were much better at Halifax. The club's staff convinced him to quit his job, and even though he was only making about minimum wage, the chance to train every day for the first time in his life worked wonders.
Yeah, it's good
and
for
he
your
ended up
body and
scoring
your mind.
25 goals in 37 matches that season, leading his team to yet another promotion, being named the league's Player of the Year. And among all of this, his goalkeeper, who was friends with Theo Walcott's agent, called him and in his own words told him, "You gotta come take a look at this player. He's a lunatic, but he's single-handedly winning us the league." Maybe it was the new agent, maybe people were just finally realizing that he was a massive fish in the tiniest of ponds, but after just 1 year, Vardy was already moving to Fleetwood Town in the 5th tier. But don't get it wrong, as Vardy said, they were a non-league club on a professional basis. There he would finally be earning more money from football than he had ever made from a 9-to-5. He would finally get to have his name on the back of his shirt, and what at the time impressed him the most, he even made the national news. 5 short sentences on the BBC website under the headline, "Fleetwood Town signed FC Halifax midfielder Jamie Vardy." I mean, they got the position wrong, but it meant something to him, and his price tag, a club record £150,000, carried a lot of weight.
Wait, you know what's funny? I've learned enough about this sport and just watching enough games now to know just from the clips right here that midfielder statement was completely false. I read that, I'm like, midfielder? I can just tell by the positions he's playing, like around different parts of these like clips on the pitch. It's like, he's not a midfielder, what the hell? So, okay. Goes to show watching a football.
BBC website under the headline, "Fleet the position wrong, but it meant something to him," and his price tag, a club record £150,000, carried a lot of weight. As one of his new teammates would say, "At first we were like, why have we spent so much money on some random lad? But after one match, we knew why. Every time he ran through one goal, we just knew that he was not gonna miss. It was unreal." And in that same fashion, the scouts also began turning up, wondering who the hell this random guy scoring goals for fun was. And though his agent didn't think his new mohawk was great advertising, there wasn't much of a way to deny 31 goals in 36 matches, a 29-game unbeaten run, and 103 points in the league. Especially when his own manager claimed that if we didn't have Jamie, there would be no chance we'd win the league. Add to that the fact that he kept scoring in the FA Cup against teams several tiers above him, and suddenly Southampton, West Ham, Fulham and Leicester were all reported to be considering signing this non-league player. But there was just one problem. Fleetwood Town had already rejected a bid in January and informed everyone that Jamie Vardy was now the £1 million man. The most valuable non-league player of all time, and though that scared many of the clubs away, one didn't budge. Leicester broke the record and hoped for the best. However, unlike before, things didn't start well at all. Even though Vardy would start his time in the championship with almost a handful of goals in the first month and a half, then it would be almost goalless for the rest of the season. 1 goal in 19 matches before he ended up being almost dropped from the squad, not playing in any of the last 13 matches. It didn't just seem like it had been too much of a step up, Vardy was sure it was. He became seriously depressed, and as he said in his book, my way of dealing with that was to go out and get with my mates. Before the season was even over, he was already begging his managers to send him back on loan to Fleetwood, and when they denied him that, he even considered just quitting football altogether, going on about some fantasy where he'd move to Ibiza and become a nightclub promoter. He had lost it, really. At one point he was
I'm not laughing at him. I just realized how bad that actually sounds. When you have, we've all been in there. We've all been to that point, right? You could be the healthiest person in the world. You could be in the best position in the world. Or if you don't have your mental together, bro, going through anything is difficult. I've been on probably one of the biggest strides in my content career. I do a lot more outside of this YouTube channel, which is sorry for the delays on the videos recently. That's kind of why everything's been like kind of delayed with posting, especially my Patreon viewers. I'm especially sorry to you guys. When you don't have your mental together, it is very hard to even see yourself as anything, you know? I mean, it sounds like this guy's had a lot of issues, you know, from all the partying, the drinking, and I'm sure this probably wasn't his first like depression spell, perhaps. Hopefully it wasn't. Or hopefully this was his first time with that. I don't know, man. Self-doubt is a bitch. It really is. It could slow you down so much sometimes. We can literally be our worst enemies. It's really unfortunate.
Ibiza and become a nightclub promoter. He had lost it, really. At one point, he was struggling massively to recover from a simple thigh injury. No one understood why, so they began questioning him about his daily habits and found out that he would drink himself to sleep every night, chugging vodka from a 3-liter bottle that he had filled with Skittles. Taste the rainbow, I guess. If you haven't figured it out by now, well, it feels fair to say that Jamie Vardy was a high-functioning alcoholic, and in fact, he had to hit rock bottom yet again before he made it back up. With his fiancée pregnant with his second child, Vardy went on a weekend bender and ended up going missing for days. When she finally found him, he was nearly passed out in a bar. The look of disappointment in her face should have been enough, but it was the words she uttered that changed everything. I'm not gonna bring a child into your crazy world. People would die to be in your position. You gotta make something of your life with or without me, but don't throw that away. By the next year, Vardy traded his Skittle vodka for a matchday diet consisting of 3 cans of Red Bull, a double espresso, and a cheese and ham omelet. And though that wasn't the healthiest option either, it allowed them to run like a nutjob all match. And so, things finally took a turn for the best. You see, around December, after a good start, Leicester suddenly dropped to 3rd place after going 3 matches without a win, and as they needed to pull everyone together in order to secure that 1st place, no one was expecting Jamie Vardy to repeatedly save them, scoring 10 goals, 8 of which were either openers or match winners, as he led them on a 21-match unbeaten run, taking the title and being named the club's player of the season, even making sure to amp up the team's celebrations in the locker room by filling their water jugs with his famous Skittle vodka. At 27 years of age, Jamie Vardy had finally arrived at the Premier League. And his first season was something. I mean, his first ever Premier League start went something like this. Leicester were losing 3-1 against United, and though he had already assisted their first goal, then he not only won them 2 penalties, but he scored one of the goals and assisted the other to make it 5-2.
Wow.
Di Maria, Rooney, Falcao, and Van Persie were all on the pitch, and somehow some guy who just 3 years before had played in the 7th tier managed to pull off more goal contributions than those 4 put together.
That's impressive.
It was the first time in Premier League history that United had surrendered a 2-goal lead and lost. At that point, Vardy thought, what could possibly go wrong? And then, then Leicester went 13 matches without a win, and he himself went 6 months without scoring. By April, they were still bottom of the table. No club had ever spent that long at the bottom and managed to survive. That was until Vardy had something to say. With 4 minutes left in their match versus West Ham, he assisted the winning goal in injury time. In the very next match, he scored the winner and then the only goal versus Burnley. By the end of April, not only was Vardy the league's player of the month, but Leicester were already out of the relegation zone. And with Roy Hodgson watching from the stands, only 2 weeks after the end of the season, Vardy got his international debut thanks to an injury crisis. In fact, as the Daily Mirror would write, though it makes for an interesting story, it is unlikely this will ever turn into an international career. And Vardy, well, once again, he felt the same. He even asked his agent to pretend like he was injured because he saw no point in missing out on his vacation to join them if he was never gonna get called up again. But thankfully, his friends and family damn near forced him to go, and once he came back, he was a changed man. Vardy had never wanted anything as bad in his life as he wanted to be called back to that team. As he wrote, once you've rubbed shoulders with the country's best players, you don't want to let it go.
Makes
And
sense.
honestly, I think that week was what jump-started everything for him. If he was good before, now he just seemed to be in a completely different frame of mind. His motivation was on a whole new planet. 17 matches into the league season, he had contributed to a goal in every match except one. And right in the middle of that spree, there was something even more impressive. 11 consecutive matches scoring, the longest streak in the history of the Premier League. And to make all of that even more shocking, aside from their defeat to Arsenal and a 3-0 beatdown at Newcastle, Leicester had either won by a single goal or tied every single one of their matches.
That's
to say that Jamie
insane.
Vardy had been the difference maker would be an unfair representation of how much he had carried them to the top. His goal contributions had won 26 points for his team in the space of 3.5 months. Take those points away from them, and instead of being top of the league, they'd be tied for second to last. It was only fitting that Vardy got to break Van Nistelrooy's record at Old Trafford as the fans yelled out the name of their legendary goal scorer. Vardy put the nail in his coffin. He ran towards those fans and yelled back at them, "No, me, all f***ing me." It couldn't have been more iconic, not even if Tarantino had choreographed it. Leicester were unstoppable. If at the beginning of the season the bookmakers famously claimed they had a 5,000 to 1 chance of winning the league, with 11 matches to go they were still at the top.
Damn,
if the question
5,000
in
to
everyone's
1.
minds used to be when will their luck run out, by then it was more like who is going to stop them. And that was when Harry Kane had the brilliant idea of declaring himself as the man for the job, posting a picture of blood-hungry lions on Twitter, hinting that his beloved Tottenham was somehow gonna ruin Leicester's plans. But again, Vardy was there to make sure that did not happen. If he had already assisted the winners for 2 out of their last 4 matches, then he did it once more and followed it up by scoring both of their goals against Sunderland, as well as another in a draw against Everton, to total 16 points won for his team in 10 matches.
That's
And
really
even if then he got hit with a 2-match
incredible.
ban that nearly led him to lose his mind, the team kept it together, and 2 weeks later they all stood in front of the TV at Vardy's house with hundreds of fans standing outside as everyone watched Chelsea kill any chances Tottenham had left. And the moment the final whistle was sounded, first Jamie posted a picture of Mufasa on Twitter to remind Kane who was laughing last, and then it was pandemonium. As they said, Jamie Vardy was having a party. Jamie Vardy was a Premier League champion, and though the PFA snubbed him, both the FWA and the Premier League itself named him the player of the season. And
Well,
even
that's-
more importantly for him, he was called up for the 2016 Euros. By the end of that perfect year, Vardy was ranked 8th in the Ballon d'Or, above Zlatan, Lewandowski, Aguero, and even Benzema. And
I mean,
his
look at that
achievements-
listing that he's in too. That's a stacked list.
By the end of that
I
perfect
mean, look
year,
at that. That is an insanely stacked list.
he was ranked 8th in the Ballon d'Or, above Zlatan, Lewandowski, Aguero, and even Benzema. And his achievements did not stop there. The next year, he scored in the Champions League against Sevilla and Atletico, leaving Leicester one step away from the semi-finals. The year after that, he scored the goal of the season and joined England for the World Cup. And in 2020, he finally made up for what was maybe the biggest regret in his career. If in his memorable 2016 season he had finished 1 goal off of the Golden Boot, much thanks to his 2-match ban, then he made up for it, beating Didier Drogba to become the oldest ever player to take the award, and leaving him 7 goals off of the Premier League 100 club, which obviously reached the following season and made it even more impressive by adding 1 more achievement, becoming the first ever player to score 100 Premier League goals after the age of 30.
That's
and though Leicester has now dropped back to the
insane.
second tier, what makes me the saddest about his career is that he never really got a proper chance with England. I mean, he only ever played a full 90 for his national team on 6 different occasions, and still managed to score 7 times, including goals against Germany, Spain, Italy, and the Netherlands. All of them decisive goals. Because when you're clutch everywhere.
I love the way that Daily Dose of Football directs these videos, by the way. Can I just say that? I never feel like I'm not engaged when I'm watching them. Like he's always feeding you so much good information, you know? That is, yeah. I gotta say, man, I love these kind of success stories when a person is down, when they're really just stuck in their own head, they develop these bad habits and they come out on top, man. I feel like we don't really hear about that much though. We hear so much about the negative. We never really hear about the like little wins like this, you know? But granted, this was also an era when I wasn't paying attention to the sport, so it could have been different back then, to be perfectly honest. So he won the Premier League, and then what else was on his record? Some other like lower division wins here and there, but what else? He has a Golden Boot, 8th place on the Ballon d'Or, and then a Premier League win with Leicester. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know that's how that like name was pronounced. I used to say Leicester. Forgive me, okay? But okay, so that's how you say Leicester. What is he doing now? Is he retired or is he still playing? Did he call it quits and hang up the boots? And I'm not gonna lie, shout out to his at the time fiance, I assume probably not wife, or hitting him with that statement versus just calling him a piece of shit and telling him to quit everything and he's worthless or whatever. Like, she could have really gone so many different directions with that, given his behavior at the time. But I gotta say, man, it's very rare you will find a lady that will stick out with you, you know? She said with or without me, but at the end of the day, she really had his best interest in mind, it sounded like. So I'm happy that she did that. We see time and again from this sport to basketball, so many what if stories because of bad habits and mental disorders of different sorts. You never know what could happen with some of these like players, how far they could have gone in their careers or whatever. So anytime we get situations like this, I just love seeing success stories. I love seeing people get out of that dark hole, you know? But shout out to Jamie Vardy, man. I love seeing people overcome their demons. Well, that was the beautiful story of the beer chugging maniac who took over the Premier League, Jamie Vardy. Shout out to Daily Dose of Football. Once again, be sure to go check out the original video, which I will leave a link for in the description down below. Be sure to go support Daily Dose of Football. And hey, let me know what else you want me to react to, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope to catch you in the next one. This is your boy Jay with another football reaction. I'll see you later. Peace.